Okay, so hi Alice. Thanks for
Hello.
talking to me.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so do you just want to tell us a little bit about Playing Sane and how the idea came about?
Yeah, of course. So I'm an actor. I trained years ago, and I've lived with mental health issues my whole life, and I developed arthritis when I was 26 as well, which caused now a permanent disability, invisible health issues.
Hmm.
About what would it be, about 4 years ago, the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester was doing some work on engagement with actors with disabilities. So I went along actually because of the arthritis and because of the way that had altered my career. And I rapidly realized that the mental health aspect wasn't being addressed. I realized that we were talking about disability, but mental health difficulties weren't in there. And it wasn't because people were being difficult about it. It was just that there wasn't really anything. Now, in my kind of bigger life, I have lived experience around severe and enduring mental health issues, really quite complex, high level needs. So I am very aware that mental health issues can become disabling.
Yeah.
They really can. And so, yeah, I just was having conversations and I went, well, I'm going to go and do some homework and find out what we know about actors and mental health. And I kind of went, we don't know much, do we? There's really not much there. So I had a conversation with Manchester School of Theatre, because I'm based in
Yeah.
Manchester. And they sort of went, oh, that's a PhD. Here you go, that's how you apply. And 5 months later, my application was in, and now I'm doing
That's
a PhD.
amazing.
Yeah, it was a massive gear change, and it all happened. It normally takes a year or two to put together a PhD, so
Hmm.
it came together very fast. But yeah, so that's how I ended up doing research. That's why I ended up doing research. What I wanted to do then was do something industry and public facing, because research can be very dry, it can be very difficult for people to incorporate
Yeah.
into practice. And for me, this is all about changing practice. It's all about making our industry better for us and for each other. So Playing Sane originally was just going to be a website where I kind of talked about a few things, got some people to speak. What rapidly happened is people started saying, will you come and do a talk? Will you do this? Are you running workshops? So then I talked to a former student of mine who's a high-level CBT practitioner. She's my fellow director in Playing Sane. We have another person who comes in sometimes to help with the accounts and things like that. So it's now a not-for-profit company, a CIC.
Wow.
And we're taking it very slow because we don't want to duplicate services that are already there.
Yeah.
You've got some organisations doing phenomenal work, and we don't see any point in doing the same thing over and over again. So we're focusing on looking at evidence bases, looking at sort of more formal research that we can then support organisations like Equity
Hmm.
to do things like lobbying, changing contracts, changing procedures, maybe even changing legislation. So that's sort of who we are, what we do, and why we do it.
Okay, great. So, do you know, like, roughly how many people you've been able to reach through, the website and the organization?
It's in the thousands. Because we're multifaceted.
Hmm.
It's not always easy to tell. We
Yeah.
reach at least a few hundred every month on the website. We have a good few hundred followers on Twitter. We are on Facebook and Instagram as well. But it's also about us attending events. I do a lot of engagement with an organisation called Triple C, who run a disabled artist network. So I talk about it there a lot. I come to equity events and talk about it. So we've reached out certainly a good few thousand people. I would love to do more. I feel like outreach is a challenge at the minute because we're unfunded.
Yeah.
So we rely on volunteer time and on any donations we get. So things like creating promotional material, doing adverts to promote well-being, those sorts of things aren't really an option at the minute, which we would like to address going forward, and we are looking at. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do a lot more, and we'd like to do a lot more in collaboration with organisations like Equity and Spotlight and Mandy.com, people who have a real impact on our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was really interesting what you said about us not addressing the mental health side of our business, and not really seeing that as, because I mean I've had a lot of mental health issues myself in the past, and I think we tend to brush over them. It's seen as not being part of, like you're going to be seen as unreliable or difficult or volatile.
I hear that a lot. I hear that an awful lot, and unfortunately I don't think it's entirely unjustified. I listened to I think it was Harry from the Talk community. I don't know if you've ever been to their peer support groups. They're wonderful. But Harry was talking about actually discussing with an actor who had been turfed off contract.
Yeah.
Because they disclose mental health issues. Now that is illegal, and there's a lot the union can do about that, but it doesn't change the fact that it happened and that people still think that's an acceptable thing to do. And that does terrify people. Living with complex mental health problems is challenging enough.
Yeah.
Without being terrified that people are going to use it against you. I actually think that the stigma in our industry is some of the worst that I've come across.
Yeah.
And I think it's a knotty thing to solve. And the reason I'm coming at it, one of the reasons I'm coming at it the way I do is because I think if we can build it more into our systems, if we can recognise it at an institutional level, at a national level, actually that backs up the work that people like Talk, like Industry Minds, like the MTA are doing. Some really, really good work, but it sort of brings it from both ends. Because at the moment, a lot of the reliance for changing stigma is on actors and performers and stage managers and directors feeling safe to talk about it. And I just don't think people do. And I think there's good reasons for that.
Yeah.
Which have to be addressed if we want to improve the situation.
And I think it is a thing, not just in the acting world, but in the general population as well. Because according to the mental health charity Mind, I looked up 1 in 4 people, and that's just in England, will experience a mental health problem of some kind every year. So, I mean, I don't know, do you think that actors are more or less affected by that, or do you think it is, through the general population?
I don't think we know the answer to that. And that was one of the things that really surprised me when I started looking at this work, is how little is actually being done on actors and on a lot of sections in our industry. We don't know anything about directors or casting directors and their mental health. We don't know anything about makeup artists or camera people. Very, very, very little, which is deeply worrying, particularly, and coming from an acting background. As an actor, you spend your life working with emotions. you spend your life working with thought processes, the idea that we haven't really looked at what that's doing to mental health just seems insane to me. I mean, that's just a really odd thing, but actually the numbers aren't there. The numbers really aren't there. There's a really good bit of work that was done in Australia called the Australian Actors Wellbeing Survey, I think was it. It was the full title.
One of those long names.
Yeah, one of the. It's a really good piece of work, but it's very country specific.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things they're talking about are the cultures in Australia. So, of course, it gives us a good idea where to start, but it doesn't really tell us much about our country.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, there's also the fact that statistics around mental health are really difficult to gather. So the 1 in 4 statistic, if you look at the Mental Health Foundation, they tend to use 1 in 6 per week.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's the statistic they use. And the reasons for that are things like the way mental health is defined, whether you're working with diagnostics or, you know, hospital admissions,
mm-hmm.
whether you're asking people to say what they think they've got, it all changes how you view it. So, yeah, it's really quite a messy picture that we don't really know. We don't really know, basically. What we do know, and so it's not complete. There are some things out there. We know that there are relationships between high creativity and mental distress. Now, whether that's, you know, an interesting one is that if you work in a creative field, you're much more likely to have a first degree relative, so a parent or a sibling, who has schizophrenia.
Wow.
Which is a funny one. So that suggests that there's some kind of relationship in how the brains work. We also know that you talk about creatives, but if you break that into subgroups, actually you get quite different problems and experiences and quite different behaviours. So one of the things that I'm very, very cautious of is, for example, looking at work that talks about performers.
Yeah.
Because performers is a hugely broad group, and we already know that they have different experiences and have different difficulties.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, I'm very careful of sort of saying, well, this work was done on musicians, therefore it will translate to actors. Actually, in my opinion, the evidence suggests that that's not true.
Yeah.
That you can't make that assumption. So we do have some information, but there's an awful lot of gaps. There's a it's been a funny thing for me over the last 2 years, because I'm doing my PhD part-time, so it's going to take 6 years.
Yeah.
So I'm, over the last 2 years, one of the conversations that I've been having over and over again is, how do you address that? Where do you even begin when there's such little work on this
mm-hmm.
population? So for research purposes, we would call actors a population. Where do you even start when we have no idea? You know, I when I started this, I fully expected to be going sort of straight into procedures, sort of what do we do in the rehearsal room? What do we do? What's in the training that we do? How is it impacting? But no, I'm starting with, how many people actually have difficulties? How many people? What are we actually dealing with? The last thing I will say on this is, there is always a danger when you sort of say 1 in 4 or 1 in 6, that we forget that just like everyone has physical health, everyone has mental health. And just like everyone will get a cough or a cold, and everyone will sprain an ankle at some point, we will all have periods that, if you went to a doctor, could be diagnosed as a mental health issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we do need to start talking about, you know, these experiences. If you want to call them mental illness, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't like that term. Some people talk about different experiences, or, you know, there's a lot of different ways of talking about it. we need to be clear that it is something everyone experiences. It's not just those people over there who are in the 1 in 4. We all get it from time to time, to a greater or lesser degree, and we all need to attend to it and to make sure that it doesn't escalate into something really dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, mental health distress, mental illness, however you want to characterize it, it kills. It can kill people. And at the heart of what I'm doing is the knowledge that we're not talking just about making people feel a bit better. We're not talking about something touchy-feely and, oh, you know, poor you, you're having a bad time, which I think there is that hovering in our industry. These are things that can lead to death. And that is not something you take lightly. That is not something you do carelessly. The reason I really want evidence, I want to know, not because I particularly like wading through statistics, you know, I don't know anyone who likes doing that, but because I don't want a single one of my colleagues to die for no good reason. I do not ever want that to happen. And if I can do anything to make it better and to improve that and to make it less likely that we lose another performer, another comedian, another whoever, I want to help that, because you know, there's just no reason for it. We can do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we are starting to shift as a culture, and you know, I know that from my experiences, I've had some really, you know, good workplaces and some workplaces that were really just not, you know, that have, and I think because we have this show must go on culture, that we don't take into account people's, you know, sometimes even people's physical health, you know, as well as their mental health. Not that, and I mean, I would say one, you know, can definitely, they do impact on each other.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh no, physical and mental health are quite, I mean, we know they're much more closely related than sort of 20 years ago we talked about the mind-body divide, the brain-body divide. Most people now would say that that's redundant.
Yeah.
That we know that they interact. I think the show must go on attitude is something that we really do have to address. The show must go on attitude comes about, I mean, I'm sure you've had this. I remember doing open air theatre with rain coming down, the set falling over,
been there.
the audience over, a dog in the audience, you know, what do we do? That is where the show must go on, that's what it's about. It's about someone's just got sick, you have to do that, you need to do this, you just keep going. Because if you've ever done a show which has been pulled, I remember doing a show, there was no physical way we could do it, and we had, because it was so last minute, we had to tell the audience as they were arriving. And you doing something like that, you understand the role that this work has in people's lives and why it's important. That is what the show must go on is for. It's not to beat people over the head and say you are not allowed to be human. You are not allowed to have a bad day. You are not allowed to get sick, which is actually, in my opinion, very much how it has become used. And I think equity has a huge role to play in that. I feel like, I mean, I graduated in 2006, so I've been around the industry professionally for 14 years and sort of doing other things prior to that. I feel like there's been a progressive disempowerment of our workforce. There's been this progressive, and I think to a degree it's always been there, but I feel like it has got worse, certainly in the last 10 years, where we are sort of told to be as passive as we can possibly be. Just stand there and do what you're told. And we are skilled workers. We are skilled workers with professional training, professional experience, with a set of tools that actually not anybody can do. I teach acting. I know that not anybody can do it. What this idea that we are replaceable is that if someone is weak or difficult, they can just be got rid of. As a union, we really have to address that. We really have to address that, because it is deeply damaging. It's a deeply damaging attitude to have to any workforce. But for a creative workforce, it opens the gate to discrimination, to really poor treatment in terms of workplace experiences, so in terms of physical environment and contracts, and so on and so forth. And I kind of feel like, weirdly, the pandemic and the catastrophe that we are currently witnessing can also be seen to give us an opportunity to rebuild better.
Okay, that's really interesting that you've brought up the COVID pandemic, because it's having such a big impact on all creative workers, especially those in theatre. Have you had like an increase in demand during lockdown, and how's that worked for you?
So what we paused for a little while, and what we did is, in response to what we were seeing, we created a small service to help pick up people being missed by other services, where what we do is you self-refer to us. As long as you are because Playing Sane is actors, their colleagues or carers, as long as you are an actor, a colleague to an actor, or a carer to an actor, you can come in, and we will match you up with a freelance mental health professional, and they are high-level professionals. We've got volunteering, and you will get up to 3 hours free support to deal with that. So, and we have had people take up on that. We could still take more people, and we intend to keep running it until the crisis has abated a bit. So that is there if people want to use it. And we want it there because there are quite a few other services running for our industry at the minute. But we also know that some people do get missed, or they don't fit criteria. So we wanted to offer something specifically designed to fill in that gap, something that people could access rapidly. They can get, it's me checking the referrals. So if you contact, you will get an email from me saying, I've got your message, I'm contacting the volunteers now. We will get you linked up with someone as quickly as possible. The volunteers, including my colleague, my fellow director, they're all high-level NHS professionals. I'm very fussy about who I let loose on things like this.
Rightly so.
Oh yes, and I this was a discussion I had in Bristol about the fact that there is a danger when we look at mental health, in that you've got the big organisations, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, the British Psychological Association, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, you also get a lot of people who've I've done a 2-day counselling course, so I'm a counsellor, and they're not. They're really not. They're
just online. I see them advertised all the time, like, become a counsellor, and I'm like, really? You think that's supposed to qualify you somehow?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. There are good courses which introduce counselling in a day or two, and sort of say this is just giving you a taste of what it would be. But a proper counselling or therapeutic, to become a clinical psychologist, it's the equivalent of doing a PhD.
Yeah.
You do as much training as you would do to become a doctor. Quite rightly so.
Yes.
Quite rightly so. So I'm very protective of who I let loose on anyone who comes to talk to me. Because the other thing that you see a lot is people using life coaches as therapists, and it's a different discipline. There's overlap, but they are different. So that's been our response. And as I say, we've gone out. I've made a point of going to meetings and talking to people and letting people know. I've been taking part in the talk sessions as much as I physically can, and just kind of reaching out to the industry and saying, you are not on your own in this. This is chaos. It's chaos for everybody. We will get through it. The shape of things at the other end, is entirely up for discussion,
Yeah.
but we will. And there will be an industry at the other end of it. We just have to support each other through this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is, I mean, because you posted something on Facebook, I think, about that there will always be people who have the need to create. It's just how are we going to support that in, in the future
Yeah.
when all this is over.
Mm.
But as being part of the Young Members Committee, this is our focus on young members.
Yes.
And there's been some research done by the TUC, that's the Trade Union Congress, which is, just for anyone who doesn't
I
know,
can never remember whether it's Congress or Council or...
yeah,
Yeah.
so each trade union will have its own council.
Yeah.
Depending on when this goes out, we may still be having the council elections. So if you're
Please
equity
vote.
members,
It's
yes,
important.
vote.
Vote.
Because this is how you shape the future of your union. So each trade union will have its own council made up of members to make decisions in how we're going to move forwards and change things. So the Trade Union Congress is the coming together of all of those unions. So Equity ourselves, plus any of the other creative unions, BEC2, Musicians Union, and all of the big other industrial unions, such as Unite and GMB, all coming together to try and see how we can improve conditions for workers in general. And they have done some research. This is for workers aged 25 and under, and they make up 13% of those in employment across all industries, which isn't a huge number. However, 37% of those are working in the accommodation and food industry, and a quarter are working in the arts. So that's over 50% of people 25 and under are in the two industries that have been hit the hardest by this pandemic. And it's a bit of a bit of a double whammy for a lot of actors or other people working in theatre, is that we often rely on food and hospitality as our backup job, as our way that we earn money when we're not in employment in acting and things like that.
Absolutely.
So have you got any advice for how you can try and take care of your mental health under what is, let's be honest, it's pretty bleak circumstances?
No, it is. And I don't think it's helpful to sugarcoat it either, because I think what you can end up doing is people can end up feeling blamed for struggling if you sugarcoat it. And actually, there is nothing to sugarcoat here. It's a terrible situation. And I had a friend graduate from Manchester School of Theatre this year, and I just want to give him a big hug. I'm sorry. I think, first and foremost, do all the basics. Try and eat well, try and sleep well, try and keep in touch with people, try and get outside, do all the real basics. I was chatting to Caroline, who is my fellow director, yesterday, and she was sort of saying it's very easy to miss the basics when you are struggling. Simple things like if you've ever come across the big 5 ways to well-being, there's an article on Playing Sane about it if people want to take a look, but it's things like being mindful. So if you can do 2 minutes mindfulness a day, it's things like keeping learning. So, and it doesn't have to be to do with work. And in fact, for our sector, for artists, personally, I would say your identity as an artist, which is really embedded for us. I think you get it across all industries where people identify with their work. But I think for artists, for creatives, it's exaggerated. Particularly actors and performers who use our identity in our work, there is a real blurring of your work and you. So at times like this, that can be incredibly disruptive and damaging. I remember when I spent a year and a half on crutches, and I couldn't do me.
Yeah.
And it was really, really confusing. So what I would say to people is attend to the parts of you that aren't about work. And you can do that whilst also specifically supporting your well-being. So attend to things like creating something that you aren't going to use as a performer. You know, I do cross stitch. I do cross stitch or make cards. You could take a car apart. You could learn how to cook a new meal. And it's making sure that you are you and that you have a space to be you regardless of work. And actually, this is something I feel young performers in particular are often not advised to do. You're told to make it all about it, to never say no, to do everything all the time, which is problematic in an industry where most of us don't work most of the time. It means that our sense of self, our values, the things that give us meaning are often at the beholden of someone else's ideas of what should happen. And we have to, now more than ever, we really have to look after that. So think about things like, why do you perform in the first place? So for me, I perform because I love to communicate. I love to talk to people. I love to share things with people. How can I do that in a situation like this? That's a challenge to myself, but it also means I can keep being me without having to rely on a circumstance that is brutal right now. I mean, brutal, next level, 5 levels up type of thing.
Yeah.
And I would say also know that this is not the end. It's a crappy beginning, and I don't envy you, and I'm sorry, I wish I could make it better. But if you are 25, you could quite realistically be performing for another 50 years. The industry being rubbish for the next 3 or 4 or 5 isn't the end. As my old tutor used to say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. This is the beginning of your journey, not the end of it. If you take 5 years out, if you went off and did something else for 5 years and came back, you will be able to do that. There are people who do that.
That's really valuable. Because I think the most valuable thing that I did was a couple of years after, I mean, I graduated in 2010. And a couple of years after, I took a year out. I didn't act for a year. I spent 6 months teaching English in China, and actually just giving myself a life outside. You know, one of the other members of the Young Members Committee was saying the other day how on her first professional job, some of the older actors, she was really surprised that they all just went home to their kids at the weekend, and, you know, they had a life outside of acting. Like, you know.
Yeah. I remember something I read from Judi Dench. She said, the thing you have to realise about acting is there's more to life than acting.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of young performers are taught the polar opposite.
Yeah.
And it's really not helpful. It's really not helpful. And like you, I mean, I spent a year and a half on crutches, not knowing what to do. And then a couple of years after that, I had a very serious mental health episode, and I had to take a break then. And it does change your career. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. When things like that happen. It does change what you're doing. But these things always change. No, like 3 people on the planet get the career that they expected and dreamed of. But if you know at the core why you do this, if you know how it fulfills your values and your needs, then you can come back to it. It will be there. As you just said, I posted on Facebook the other day, I have this utter faith in the arts to recover, because I don't believe you can kill art. I think the need to express, the need to communicate, the need to create is fundamental to people.
Absolutely.
It is an absolutely core human need. So it will come back. It might not be the shape we recognize, it will be something different, but change is a part of creation. Change and development is part of what we do. So embrace it. Know that there might be a pause, and there might be a pause, but it will come back. It will be there. Might not be in the form you've got now, but it will be there. There will be things you can do. Be ready for it. Keep yourself well. Keep yourself healthy, so that when it comes back, when that opportunity knocks, and it will, opportunities will knock again, you are ready, because that is the best thing you can be. Healthy, happy, confident, and well, so that when those things happen, you can do it.
Yeah.
That's what we need from particularly our young performers, because in a few years' time, we are going to need you. We are really, really going to need you. And much more than you're going to need someone like me. The young performers drive so much of what we do, particularly in live work. So, particularly if you talk about musical theatre and dance.
Yeah.
Anything physical, the young performers are absolutely critical to it. So keep yourselves well, keep yourselves healthy physically and mentally, and be ready, because we will need you. That would be my advice.
Great, thank you very much for talking to me today. That's Alice Brockway from Playing Sane.